The cafe lights were doing that thing they do in the evening. You know, when everything gets softer, warmer, like the world's giving you permission to slow down for a second. Outside, October rain was coming down steady, turning the street into this blurry watercolor of headlights and reflections. Inside smelled like fresh coffee and cinnamon, and someone had put on this old piano melody that made you want to remember things you've been trying to forget. But over in the corner booth, something felt off. A man sat there with his hands folded tight on the table, shoulders bunched up, like he was bracing for impact. He kept staring out the window, like he might find courage somewhere in that rain-soaked street. His shirt was pressed, probably ironed twice, but there was this little coffee stain on his cuff he kept trying to hide with his other hand. Across from him, a woman twisted the strap of her purse over and over. She was breathing carefully, the way you do when you're one wrong word away from tears or the door. Her dress looked new. Her hair was done with the kind of effort that comes from equal parts hope and absolute terror. Neither of them said a word. But somehow, their silence was screaming. Both of them had been here before. Not this cafe, but this feeling. That moment when you realize you're about to get hurt again, and there's not a damn thing you can do to stop it. Somewhere across the room, people laughed. They both flinched. Here's what they didn't know yet. This wasn't fate. It wasn't chance. It wasn't even a real attempt at connection. This whole thing was a setup. A joke cooked up by people who thought humiliation was hilarious, who saw someone's vulnerability and thought, yeah, let's film that. People who genuinely believe some folks exist just to be laughed at. But what those people didn't count on, what they couldn't have possibly seen coming, was that these two quiet, hurting people sitting in that corner booth had something way more powerful than cruelty could ever touch. They had dignity. They had courage. And they had this deep capacity for kindness that was about to flip the whole script. Look, before we go any further, I need to ask you something. If you're the kind of person who still believes in kindness, in second chances, in people who refuse to give up even when life keeps knocking them down, do me a favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to this channel Heartwarming Tales. I know. Everyone asks for that. But here's the thing. Your support actually helps us spread these stories. And what happens next? It's going to remind you exactly why humanity is worth rooting for. So let's go back to where this really started. His name was Aaron Turner. And if you asked anyone who knew him, they'd all tell you the same thing. He was genuinely one of the good ones. At 36, Aaron was working as a forklift operator in this massive warehouse on the edge of town. Not exactly glamorous. Definitely not what he'd imagined doing when he was younger, and still believed the world owed him something. But it paid the bills, and more than that, it let him be home every single day in time to pick up his 7-year-old son, Cole, from school. Cole was Aaron's entire world. When you looked at Cole, you saw Aaron's late wife, Emma. Same bright eyes. Same smile that could light up a room. Same way of finding magic in the most ordinary things. Emma had died 3 years ago from a brain aneurysm. Just out of nowhere. One second, she was laughing at breakfast, making plans for the weekend. The next second, she was gone. No warning. No time to prepare. No goodbye. Aaron had almost drowned in that grief. There were whole weeks where he couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't look at Cole without feeling like his chest was caving in. His mom had moved in for a while, cooking meals he couldn't taste, holding Cole when Aaron physically couldn't find the strength to do it himself. But slowly, painfully, brutally slowly, Aaron figured out how to keep going. Not for himself. He honestly didn't care about himself. But for Cole. He picked up double shifts whenever he could. Skipped every holiday party, every invitation, every single thing he might have wanted for himself. Because Cole needed stability. Cole needed to know that even though mommy was gone, daddy wasn't going anywhere. So Aaron became both parents. He taught himself to braid hair. Badly at first, God, so badly. He learned which cartoon characters were currently cool. He figured out how to pack lunches Cole would actually eat, how to remember permission slips, how to show up to every school thing even when he was so tired he could barely stand. His coworkers knew him as the quiet guy who never complained, who always took extra shifts, who ate lunch alone in his truck scrolling through pictures of his kid. What they didn't know was that Aaron was lonely in a way that hurt. He missed having someone to talk to, someone to share the weight with, someone to just be there when Cole went to bed and the house got too quiet. But dating? That felt impossible. It felt like cheating on Emma's memory, like admitting she was really, actually gone. So Aaron just kept going, day after day, alone. The woman sitting across from him was Grace Mitchell, and you could see her entire story in the careful way she moved, always taking up as little space as possible, always ready to apologize for existing, always expecting the worst. At 29, Grace had built a life around expecting rejection. She'd been the fat kid, growing up in one of those small towns where everyone knows everyone, and there's nowhere to hide. Middle school had been hell. High school had been worse. College promised a fresh start, but turns out old wounds don't heal just because you change your zip code. Grace carried scars most people couldn't see. The boy in 8th grade who asked her to the dance as a joke, then laughed in her face when she said yes. The girls who made whale sounds when she walked down the hallway. That time she overheard her own aunt telling her mom, she'd be so pretty if she just lost the weight. The countless first dates that ended with guys suddenly remembering they had somewhere else to be. But here's what people missed about Grace. She was brilliant. She had a master's degree and worked as a children's librarian downtown. The kids absolutely loved her because she remembered their names, their favorite books, which ones were struggling and which ones were ready to level up. She did voices during story time that made toddlers lose their minds laughing. She built reading programs that got kids who hated books genuinely excited about them. Grace lived in this tiny apartment packed with plants she talked to, shelves drowning in novels, and a cat named Darcy. She had good friends who really loved her. She had a life that was quiet but actually full. But she was also achingly, crushingly lonely. Grace wanted what everyone wants, to be seen, to matter, to be chosen, not in spite of her body, but as a whole human being whose body was just one part of the package. Her younger sister Michelle had been trying to set Grace up for years. Grace usually said no. But last week, Michelle had actually begged. Please, Grace. Just one date. He's a single dad, he's kind, he needs to meet people. Just please. One coffee. What's the worst that could happen? Grace had heard that question before. She knew exactly what the worst could be. But she said yes anyway. Not because she was hopeful, but because she was brave. And that's how she ended up in this cafe on a rainy night, sitting across from a man who looked just as terrified as she felt. What neither of them knew, what they couldn't have known, was that this whole thing was fake. Aaron's coworkers had set it up as a joke. 3 guys in their 20s, Derek, Josh, and Marcus, had literally planned this in the warehouse break room last week. Derek had been scrolling through Facebook when he saw Aaron's mom had posted something. Wish my sweet son would find someone special. He deserves happiness. Derek showed it to the other 2, and his eyes lit up, like he'd just cracked the Da Vinci Code. Guys, I have the funniest idea. Here's what they did. They made a fake dating profile using some random attractive woman's photos. Messaged Aaron pretending to be interested. Set up the date. Then, and this is where it gets really twisted, they contacted Michelle through mutual friends. Told her they had this really nice single dad friend looking to meet someone. Michelle, genuinely trying to help her sister, gave them Grace's number. The plan was simple and cruel. Aaron shows up expecting one woman, finds Grace instead. They'd film his reaction from across the cafe. Capture the awkwardness, the disappointment, maybe Aaron making up an excuse to leave. Then they'd share it in their group chat, maybe post it online for laughs. Peak comedy, Derek had said. The others agreed. None of them stopped to consider they were messing with real people. Real feelings. Real pain. To them, Aaron was just a boring sad guy at work who needed to lighten up. And Grace? Grace was just the punchline. Aaron got there early, 15 minutes early, because that's who he was. He ordered coffee, he didn't drink, and sat there rehearsing conversation starters in his head. Hi, I'm Aaron. Nice to meet you. How was your day? Basic. Normal. He could do this. Then Grace walked in. She stood in the doorway scanning the room, looking nervous as hell. Her eyes landed on Aaron, the only person sitting alone, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition mixed with this bone-deep resignation. She'd seen that look before. She knew exactly what it meant. Grace walked over slowly, her smile already apologetic. Aaron? He looked up, and for just a second, just a flash, surprise crossed his face. Grace saw it, felt it like a knife between her ribs. Hi, she said quietly, voice steady even though she was falling apart inside. I'm Grace. I'm guessing I'm not what you expected. Aaron jumped up, awkward as hell. No, I mean, yes, I mean. He gestured at the seat. Please sit. She sat. He sat. The silence was brutal. From a back table, Derek held up his phone, recording. Josh and Marcus leaned in, grinning, waiting for the show. Grace twisted her purse strap. Aaron stared at his coffee like it held answers. Look, Grace finally said, soft but firm. We don't have to do this. I know how these things go. You can leave. I won't be offended. I'm used to it. Those last 4 words, I'm used to it, hit Aaron like lightning. He actually looked at her then. Really looked. And he saw the same thing he felt every damn day. Exhaustion. The weariness of someone who's been hurt so many times they've stopped expecting anything different. I'm not leaving, Aaron said quietly. Grace's eyes went wide. I mean, if you want me to leave, I will, Aaron continued. But I'm not leaving because of... He stopped, choosing his words carefully. You seem really nervous, and I don't want to make that worse. But I'd like to stay. If that's okay. Grace studied his face, looking for the catch. For the cruelty. For the pity. She found none of it. What she found instead was something she didn't expect. Sincerity. Okay, she whispered. They ordered coffee. Started talking, halting, awkward but real. Aaron told her about Cole. Grace's whole face transformed when he mentioned his son. I work at the children's library, she said. I love kids. What does Cole like to read? Anything with dinosaurs, Aaron said, and for the first time all night he smiled. An actual, genuine smile. Grace smiled back. And that's when Derek, Josh, and Marcus realized their plan was going sideways. The conversation started flowing. Grace told Aaron about this reading program she'd started for kids with dyslexia. Her voice got all animated, passionate, as she described watching struggling readers finally discover books they could actually enjoy. Aaron told Grace about the time Cole insisted on wearing a dinosaur costume to school for an entire week, including parent-teacher conferences. They laughed. Small at first, tentative, like they'd forgotten how. But real. Can I ask you something? Grace said after a while, getting serious. Of course. Why are you really here? And I don't mean that in a self-pity way. I mean, you seem like you're still grieving. Like maybe you're not ready for this. Aaron went quiet for a long moment. My wife died 3 years ago, he said finally. And you're right. I don't know if I'm ready. But my son asked me last week why I never smile anymore and His voice cracked. I realized I'd stopped trying to be happy. Like being happy would somehow disrespect Emma's memory. But that's not fair to Cole. And it's not what Emma would have wanted. Grace reached across the table and gently touched his hand. Just her fingertips on his knuckles. But Aaron felt it like warmth spreading through ice water. I think, Grace said softly, that trying to be happy again is one of the bravest things a person can do. Aaron's eyes filled with tears. So did Grace's. Why are you here? Aaron asked. If you don't mind me asking. Grace took a shaky breath. Because I'm tired of letting other people's opinions stop me from living. Because I want to believe that someone might see me, actually see me, as more than just this. She gestured vaguely at herself. I see you, Aaron said. And he meant it. Grace started crying. Not from sadness, but from the absolute shock of being believed. That's when Derek decided to make his move.
Derek stood up from his table and walked over, phone still recording. "Hey, Aaron! How's the date going, buddy?" His voice was too loud, performative. Aaron's face went ice cold. "Derek, what are you doing here?" "Just grabbing coffee." "Crazy coincidence, right?" Derek smirked at Grace, then back at Aaron. "So, having fun?" Grace went pale. She knew that tone. She'd heard it 1,000 times before. Aaron stood up slowly. "Turn off your phone," he said quietly. "What?" "Dude, I'm just... Turn off your phone." Something in Aaron's voice made Derek hesitate. Josh and Marcus came over now, sensing drama. Grace wanted to disappear. Wanted to run. But something kept her frozen. Aaron took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice was calm but absolutely filled with steel. "You set this up, didn't you? This whole thing. You thought it would be funny." Derek's smirk faltered. "Come on, man, we were just..." "You used me. And you used her." Aaron gestured to Grace, who was shaking now. "You turned a real person with real feelings into a joke for your entertainment." "Dude, it's not that serious." "It's exactly that serious," Aaron said, voice rising. "Do you have any idea what it takes to show up to a first date? The courage that requires? Especially when the world has already told you 1,000 times that you're not good enough?" Grace was openly crying now. Aaron kept going, eyes locked on Derek. "Grace came here tonight knowing she'd probably be disappointed. Knowing she'd probably get hurt. And she came anyway. That's not weakness. That's strength you can't even begin to comprehend." The cafe had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching. "And you," Aaron said, voice breaking slightly. "You thought breaking someone else down would make you feel bigger. But all it does is show how pathetically small you really are." Derek's face flushed red. Josh and Marcus stared at the floor. "I lost my wife," Aaron said, quieter now. "I know what it's like to feel worthless. To wake up every day wondering if you're enough. And the only thing that saved me was people showing up with kindness instead of judgment. So I will never, never, be part of making someone else feel less than." He turned to Grace. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I would never have." "I know," Grace whispered. "I believe you." Aaron pulled a 20 from his wallet and set it on the table. Then he held out his hand to Grace. "You want to get out of here? We can go somewhere else. Somewhere we're not part of someone's twisted entertainment." Grace looked at his hand. Then she took it. They walked out together, leaving Derek, Josh, and Marcus standing there in dead silence. Outside, the rain had stopped. The street was clean and glistening, reflecting streetlights like scattered stars. Grace was still crying. So was Aaron. "I'm sorry," Grace said, wiping her face. "I'm sorry you got dragged into this. I'm sorry." "Don't," Aaron said gently. "Don't apologize for other people's cruelty. You didn't do anything wrong." They stood on the sidewalk, either quite sure what came next. "There's a diner 2 blocks from here," Aaron said. "Quiet place. They make really good pie. Would you want to start over? Just us this time. No audience." Grace smiled through her tears. "I'd really like that." They walked side by side through the cool night air. At the diner, they ordered coffee and pie, apple for him, cherry for her, and talked for 3 hours straight. They talked about books and dinosaurs and grief and courage. About Cole and Emma and what loneliness really feels like. About the library and the warehouse and those small dreams that keep you going when everything else feels impossible. And somewhere in those 3 hours, something changed. Aaron stopped seeing a blind date. Grace stopped waiting for disappointment. They just saw each other. 2 people who'd been hurt. 2 people who kept showing up anyway. 2 people who deserved kindness. When Aaron finally walked Grace to her car, he said, "Can I see you again? Like a real date. Not a setup. Just us." Grace smiled, that full, unguarded smile people only show when they feel safe. "I'd love that." Aaron drove home that night feeling something he hadn't felt in years, hope. And Grace drove home feeling something she'd stopped believing in, worthy. The next morning, Derek, Josh, and Marcus got called into their supervisor's office. Turns out someone in that cafe had filmed Aaron's confrontation and posted it online. It went viral overnight, not as the joke they planned, but as this powerful moment of someone defending another person's dignity. The comments were brutal. These guys are disgusting. This is what real men look like, standing up for others. Hope they lose their jobs. They didn't lose their jobs. But they got a formal warning and mandatory sensitivity training. Derek's girlfriend broke up with him after watching the video. Josh's mom called him crying, ashamed of what he'd done. Marcus couldn't sleep for days. The weight of it was crushing him. A week later, Marcus showed up at Aaron's workstation. "I need to talk to you," he said quietly. They went outside. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and this time there was no smirk, no deflection. "I'm really, truly sorry. What we did was cruel and stupid, and I can't undo it. But I need you to know I've been thinking about it every single day, and I'm ashamed. I'm going to do better. I promise." Aaron looked at him for a long moment. "I appreciate you saying that," Aaron said finally. "And I hope you mean it. The world has enough cruelty already. We need people who choose differently." Marcus nodded, eyes wet. Derek and Josh never apologized. But Marcus spent the next several months volunteering at a crisis hotline, working to understand the real impact of words and actions. Sometimes people change. Sometimes they don't. But the ones who do, even late, even imperfectly, are worth believing in. 6 months has passed. Saturday morning sunlight poured through Aaron's kitchen windows. Grace stood at the stove making pancakes while Cole sat at the table coloring dinosaurs. "Grace, do the T-Rex voice again." Cole giggled. Grace turned, spatula in hand, and let out her best dinosaur roar. Cole shrieked with laughter. Aaron walked in from mowing the lawn, grass stuck to his jeans, and just stopped to take in the scene. 6 months ago, he couldn't have imagined this. Grace staying over on weekends. Cole calling her, Miss Grace, and running to hug her whenever she showed up. The house full of laughter again. It hadn't been perfect. There'd been hard conversations, about Emma, about grief, about Grace's insecurities. There'd been moments when old wounds tried to pull them apart. But they kept choosing each other. Kept showing up with honesty and kindness. Kept believing healing was actually possible. "Breakfast is ready," Grace announced, setting slightly burnt pancakes on the table. Aaron kissed her cheek. "They look perfect." "You're such a liar," Grace said, smiling. "A diplomatic liar," Aaron corrected. Cole took a bite and declared them the best pancakes in the entire universe, which made Grace tear up in that good way. After breakfast, they drove to the library for story time. Grace had invited them to this special event she'd organized, a father-child reading hour. Aaron watched Grace read to a room packed with kids and parents, her voice animated, her joy contagious. Cole sat in his lap, completely mesmerized. And Aaron thought, so this is what happiness feels like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of people who make the pain bearable. That afternoon they went to the park. Cole ran ahead to the playground while Aaron and Grace sat on a bench, hands intertwined. "I need to tell you something," Grace said nervously. Aaron's heart jumped. "Okay. I've been talking to a publisher. About writing a children's book. About a boy who loves dinosaurs and goes on adventures with his dad and this friend who runs a magical library." Aaron's eyes went wide. "Grace, that's incredible. They want to publish it," she said, crying now. "They loved it. Said it was exactly what kids need right now." Aaron pulled her into a hug. "I'm so proud of you. None of this would have happened without you," Grace whispered. "Without that night. Without you standing up for me. Without you believing I was worth knowing. You were always worth knowing," Aaron said. "I just got lucky enough to see it." They sat together watching Cole play, feeling the weight of 6 months of healing, of growth, of choosing courage over fear. Life wasn't perfect. Aaron still had hard days when grief ambushed him. Grace still struggled sometimes with old insecurities. But they had each other. And that made everything bearable.
Here's the truth nobody really tells you. Kindness isn't always easy. Sometimes it means standing up when you're exhausted. Sometimes it means defending someone when staying silent would be so much easier. Sometimes it means choosing to see people as they actually are, not as the world has labeled them. Aaron didn't save Grace that night. And Grace didn't save Aaron. They saved each other by refusing to participate in cruelty. By choosing dignity over entertainment. By believing every person deserves basic respect. The real villain here wasn't Derek, Josh, or Marcus. It was the culture that taught them some people exist as punchlines. The society that measures human worth by appearance. The mindset that mistakes cruelty for humor. But the real heroes weren't perfect people either. They were wounded people who kept showing up anyway. Who chose bravery over bitterness. Who believed connection was worth the risk. So here's my question for you. When was the last time you chose kindness when it was inconvenient? When did you last stand up for someone who couldn't defend themselves? When did you last look past someone's exterior and really see them? Because the world doesn't change through grand gestures. It changes through small, brave choices made in moments that feel tiny but matter deeply. It changes through single dads who refuse to humiliate vulnerable people. Through women who keep showing up despite being hurt over and over. Through people who understand that everyone, absolutely everyone, deserves dignity. If this story moved you, I need you to do something right now. Like this video so more people see this message. Comment below and tell me about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness, or when you chose to be kind even though it was hard. Subscribe to Heartwarming Tales, because we're committed to sharing stories that remind you why humanity is worth believing in. And most importantly, go be the person who chooses kindness. Be the Aaron in someone's story. Be the Grace who shows up despite the fear. Be the one who sees people, really sees them, and treats them like they matter. Because they do. We all do. Thanks for watching. And remember, every act of kindness creates ripples that change the world. Be the ripple.